Little Red and Her Big Bad Wolf. Little Red Riding Hood went out prancing through the wood, and Lord knows she wasn't up to any good, but man, you'd have been fooled. A single look at her and I felt like I'd never be cool. Somebody told me she was her granny's favorite drug mule. But she never was anybody's tool, never somebody's jewel, respectively. I let her rule our decisions, incisions of her wild with my mild, made it feel real, and her impurities fed my endless insecurities, burning more bridges than we could ever build. She told me that she felt him watching us in the field. I told her he probably saw a small meal. She says his aura was a bitter teal. Little Red whispers that she can't remember how to feel. It was mid-October and she couldn't have been more sober, probably a bit hungover when I told her she was my four-leaf clover. She looked through me and mouthed, "Come a little closer." Now if I knew her, she shared a dose of her, probably got scared and thought he'd start to get close to her. I mean, to be fair, I'd never met anyone easier to love. Little Red Riding Hood strolled herself to a cliff, looked 20 feet down, and thought, "This'll only hurt a bit. I've been so lonely, and today smells like shit." She rolled herself a bended spliff, lit that shit up so she could get one last hit, sat herself down, and cried for a minute. The big bad wolf smelt her tears. I heard he'd been following her for a year. He waltzed himself over, flashed his big teeth at my four-leaf clover. He offered her a ride, and Little Red was quick to deny and faster to oblige. He pried open his big jaws and said, "Baby, you know what I saw. You look so timid and sit so frigid. Come on, girl, scoot over a smidgen." The big bad wolf began to engulf her head with every heartfelt lie that his big tongue said. Months went by and she wished for no more than his big eyes to be dead. December rolled in directly after September, and the big bad wolf begged Red to surrender everything she knew. And man, her heart had never been so blue. Her kaleidoscope eyes stared into the sky, right through all of his lies, and she whispered into him, "I'm afraid you're a fool. Discipline crumpled your pedestal with ridicule and emotionless words, and horny girls' eyes fascinated on her twirl. Now come, give me a whirl. Describe love to me in a way that I could achieve meaning, instead of screaming hate off a twisted tongue that's bled too much whiskey and fought too much rum. But you're no fun, and I'm afraid you're just dumb. Come touch me some. Now baby, I'm done. Trust me, I'm not the one. My tongue is tied, your lips are dry. We're already high, but fuck it. Load another bowl. God, what I'd give to knock you off your pedestal. You think you're so cool. Ironically, of course, demonically sourced DNA. I see it in your eyes. Your mouth is closed, yet you're screaming goodbye. Push up the sky before I kiss you one last time. Tell me, where do pretty hearts die?" She gouged out his eyes, pondered on their goodbyes, and before she left, she realized she'd been hypnotized. March came crawling in, and the big bad wolf shared his big bad soul again and again. And the big bad wolf told her, "Why, I would love to love you." He flashed his big teeth, and the jagged ones were stained red. He patted her head, promised to tuck her in bed. Little Red Riding Hood batted her eyes and said, "Darling, I think we'll need to compromise." Her hand snuck in her basket and retrieved a crooked knife, stared into the big bad wolf's big bad soul as she plunged away his crooked life. And as she felt his heart grow pale, she bid him farewell, whispered, "I reckon I'll see ya in hell," because she could tell his big bad eyes had cast their wicked spell. Little Red's eyes sat dead, caved into her cheeks, muttering, "Man, life's sure bleak. I figured it'd start to look up by this week." Forged a smile into her stone face. Somehow it seemed so out of place. "She acts like we'll never win this race," she says. She still can't feel I said this isn't real, and Little Red spun herself stories like a rolling wheel, and poof, nothing was her real. She isolated and desecrated herself for months, and when she got back, her spine grew a hunch, and she drew herself air for lunch and sipped her own tears, ignored all of my fears. Vodka was her cologne. I always saw pin-cushioned arms when we were alone. Her eyes pulled dread. I heard she was dead. Somehow, death sounded suiting for my Little Red. Little Red Riding Hood straightened her hair because the smell of it makes her more there. She laced up her boots and drew a pinnacle on her forehead. Some say she needs medical help before she winds up dead. I said, how typical. That they decide Red's pinnacle. She says she just needs a hit to help her forget all the agony and irony that's been baked in Grandma's cookies. Little Red sat in her bed, hands tearing apart her head, trying to get inside of her skull to figure out what made everything so dull and love sound so null. Forgetfulness became business casual. Heartburn awaited her in an urn, lost and enchanted with a curse. Little Red Riding Hood's blood ran cold as she bargained her soul to some wrinkled bad man who'd been demoted to her pedestal. Now, if I knew her, then she shared the biggest dose of her, hoped he'd get too close to her. Man, I imagined that we could have been closer. It was hard, trying to love my four-leaf clover. Little Red Riding Hood's tongue smelt like bleach, and sometimes she forgot how to speak, or the week and often the day. Some would say she'd mold like clay, and I hated the way they spoke of my red. Little Red Riding Hood threw everything out, mouth so dry it tastes like a drought and iron. Her teeth are red, her hood is red, and her hair is red, and her eyes are dead. Black and old, I told her her soul is worth a platinum fountain spitting out gold. She says it's worth a penny and maybe some mold. That day it was 90 degrees. She said she'd never been so cold. It was probably August, and Red's smile sat ever so modest on her tired face. Eyes sat glazed, her heart in a daze, body hunched in a ball. She looked like she'd hit the wall. Last night she missed every single one of my calls, and I saw her crawl from here to there. Brown spiders sought refuge in her hair. I tried to look inside her to see if she exists. She looked through me and whispered, is there anything more than this? I just wanted one sweet kiss, but he threw my heart into the abyss, and I can't escape the emptiness. It appears that my red was caught in a labyrinth, so I reached out my hand to pull her back to land, and my commands hit like a grain of sand to a conscience demand to touch the man. And I told her I loved her. And my four-leaf clover's shoulders shuddered like she'd never heard the words uttered, and her sweet lips pressed into mine as she muttered with time, the only thing that could ever love me is the smell of death. But man, her breath soaked my tongue with life. It was probably October, and I longed to grip my four-leaf clover to sing a song that never been wrote. And fuck dude, she probably thought it was one big joke. She stopped checking in, she quit talking again. I felt so alone, my hands pulled sweat onto her granny's phone. God, she could have let me know that she found herself guilty on mental death row. I wished I'd have loved her more. Showed her how it felt to be adored before she shot that gas pedal through the floorboard, before she got too bored. And she rode to her own grave, kept her head down and her hands bound, becoming her own slave, mourning herself when morning never came quick enough. I said she was a diamond in the rough. Red says it's just her luck to be so stuck in the mud and the muck. She says she's never been good enough. I said that's tough because you see my red was more than enough for me. It'd been 2 long years. I still cry oil paint tears and visit her grave 3 times a week, leaving a petal for every rose she never saw and a medal for every race we could have won. Man, I was convinced that she was the one. But Red's the one that shot the gun. Red's the one that spoiled our fun, man. Red's the one. She'll always be my one. Little Red Riding Hood lay 6 feet down. The city mourned the loss of mine Frau. Never seen such a crowd or ever a cemetery so packed. I think it's jacked that nobody had her back until she cracked. But I'm the only one whose tears coated the sky, whose mouth sits wry, who forgot the words to every fucking lullaby. They say she's in a better place, and that she'd have never skid first in this race. Personally, I say it's a disgrace to have lost such a pretty face to self-proclaimed faults. Let's act like adults and look past all the salt. Maybe her murderous assault led to her death, or maybe she still smelt the breath of the wicked bastard who wove her so well. Little Red Riding Hood's soul resides with the big bad wolves in hell. Now, I do bid thee farewell.